Okay, so let's begin our journey tonight, and you can see that our subject today is the dream rave and the domains. We're going to look at three areas tonight in general terms. We're actually going to look at quite deep a detail into the gates, and we're going to explore dream lines and the specialized keynotes of the dream line structure, the dream hexagram. But before I get into any of these, I want you to consider something. And I don't want you, again, and this is my caution, because nobody has ever been able to truly teach human beings what this is all about. The dilemma, by the way, that is, you have a dream. And in that dream there are archetypes for you. They may be a friend, relative, lover. They may be somebody you don't absolutely know at all. It can be a thing. It can be a god, a mythological creature. It can be all kinds of things. And the bits and pieces of that dream may consist of slices of what you experience in your life at any given time. It may contain rooms that you recognize or places that you recognize, whatever the case may be. But you have to understand something. Look at this graph. I mean, you don't have all the connections to the rest of it, but you can see where the activations all are. I mean, look at this graph. The first thing that you have to realize is that there is no mind here. There's no mind here. Think about that. Please think about that. There is no mind active taking in the dream. Think about that. Think about what that really means. Think about all the bullshit you've ever heard about dreams. Dream analysis, all that stuff. The mind does not participate. It doesn't. It's almost like it's, how shall I put this? It's a movie screen. It's a movie screen. And in a sense, there is basically nobody watching. And the experience of being the watcher of the dream, which is really, as deep as we go, is very specific to certain qualities in certain gates, in certain lines. But most of what we understand of dream, that is, you don't think about a dream until you're awake. I mean, let's begin there. You don't think about it until you're awake. Now look at this design. How does it get to your mind? I mean, it's something to grasp. When one of the works that I have done in my own investigations of genetics, and it went along with my original writings on mammalian design, is that through the gates of the 15 gates that are part of the matrix of the mammal, that you can actually follow in the awake being the codon trail, because it is a genetic trail, a codon trail of how the information moves out to these 15 gates through their codon groupings, and moves out and spreads through the whole body. It just spreads through it. For example, you have a dream and you think you're being emotional in the dream. But the emotionality is only released when you wake up. Now, of course, it is a split second. But it's something to understand about this whole business of the personalization of what we, in our recovery state, determine about what the dream was. We don't get it from source. We get it filtered through a genetic trail. And we get it filtered back into what is our awareness system. And fundamentally into our mental awareness system. Everything about understanding the mechanics of the sleeper is beginning with not trying to interpret the dream for a moment and understand what we're dealing with. We are dealing with a specific programming, a programming that wants to bypass mind. Otherwise, we would not sleep. It's the only reason we sleep. Truly. Certainly in the case of generators, that's an absolute truth. You know, the Ubermensch generator would never have to sleep. You know, the perfection of that. I mean, this is about programming. We're programmed when we're unconscious. We're programmed. And we're not just programmed there. You know, this is not just the only thing that's missing. There is no identity. I. And you have all these people running around wanting to personalize their dreams instead of interpreting analytically what they receive. It's very different. You'll see yourself when you begin to look at your own dream design that you'll begin to see the patterns in your dream life. And you'll begin to see that the only way that your dream life, that is your recovery mind, can bring you that information is through stored samples, if you will, that are themes on the actual analytical value. We're being conditioned. No mind, no I, and no experiential dynamic. There's no emotional system. These things are just not there. And it's really something to grasp. You have to get to a point where you understand what the limitation is of this. Now you think about it. You know, think about let's anthropomorphize the program for a moment, right? Just as a kind of comedy routine. And the program says, God, they're idiots. What are we going to do? You know? I have the solution. You know, knock them out. You know, just knock them out. You know, program them without interference. No I, you know, no emotions, you know, no mind. Put it deep into their body. No interference. It's programming. I mean, go out onto some last place on this sweet planet of ours where there is still, you know, wildlife in abundance that is basically free from human contamination. And you're watching this program, you know, perfect control program of the creatures in nature, you know, just all humming along in the program. There's no resistance to it. There's nothing. It's just follow the program. So plants do what plants do, and birds and bees and insects and blah, blah, blah. We are knocked on our side. We are devolved. I guess that's the best way to think about the sleep state. It's a devolved state. You know, we go back. It's a regression. You know, like these people that go back in regression therapies, back into the womb. We go down the evolutionary chain. Well, think about this thing that is this sleeping design. It's taking in information at a mammalian level. At a mammalian level. I guarantee you, I know it, I can tell. My dog doesn't know the difference between its dream life and its awake life. It's all the same. It's all the same. So I need to hammer this in because there are so many misconceptions about what the sleeping state is all about. All right, so let's begin with our journey here. We're going to be looking at the light field. Now, what's interesting about the light field is that it actually dovetails beautifully into what is my morning work for me, my morning on Mondays, which is quarter by quarter. And quarter by quarter is a fascinating way of looking at the geometry and the dynamics of the wheel. And every quarter is 16 hexagrams, and each quarter of a quarter is 4 hexagrams. And it's very interesting to note that when you're looking at mammalian design, it's very limited in terms of which quarters are potentially activated. Now, in terms of mythology or mysticism, quarters are specifically related to personality forces, that is, personality crystal bundle forces. And the light field is all about the way in which we are programmed specifically by, how shall I call this, the gods and goddesses of the sleepers, you know? I mean, it's very, very specific. I mean, it's interesting because many of the configurations are basic couplets, the 8 with the 20, the 12 with the 15, the 53 with the 62, the 28 with the 50. I mean, very interesting. And there is a totally different spread in the way in which they're spread out in the quarters. After all, we're not dealing with a 64-gate matrix. We're dealing with a 15-gate matrix. In that 15-gate matrix, we have, 2 activations that are in the quarter of initiation. We have, I think, 6 that are in the quarter of civilization. We have 3 that are in the quarter of duality, and 4 that are in the quarter of mutation. It's very different. It's a totally different program sequence. It's a total different concentration of that. And what is experienced through the light field, this is the direct connection to the personality consciousness field. So these gates specifically, these are absolutely essential programming gates for the forces of, let's call them light. But that's being nice. I mean, the personality crystal bundles are the yang as opposed to the design crystal bundle and its yin. Deeply penetrating. But again, to understand that for the sleeper, for this being, first of all, the question of the activations. I can announce officially that at the very beginning of the next semester, when I begin doing analytical work in Dreamrave, the program will be ready, and so we're going to have an excellent piece of software for working with this. The activations. When you're looking at your human design, that is your waking design, obviously the design side is rooted in the retrograde of the sun. When you do a Dreamrave calculation, you take your personality sun position. That's the personality side. You take your design position, which is 88 degrees retrograde of the moon. And then you look to see, out of whatever those 2 calculations bring up, you look to see what fits in the matrix. I mean, it doesn't make any difference in this matrix whether you've got a strong ego or emotional definition, you know what I'm saying. In other words, you're looking for what is actually in this matrix, and you change. One of the most fundamental changes is that, the majority of sleepers are non-energy types. as opposed to, what is the natural polarity of the waking, which is that the vast majority of waking designs are energy types. That is, you take the 67% and the 8+% of manifestors and generators together, and you've got about 3/4 of humanity as an energy type when it's awake. But when we're asleep, approximately the same numbers are non-energy types. And there's a huge block of reflectors, sleeping reflectors. Your definitions can change. A definition can emerge that you didn't have before in that sense. So it's the first thing to recognize. The other thing is that you're not looking in that sense specifically for definition. Definition is quite a thing in a dream rave design, and I'll get to that later in our program. And it's also quite a thing, for an example, to be a generator. To be a defined generator in your dream rave. Again, this is something else that adds, another level to how important it is to know how to go to sleep. I've been teaching this for a long time, and I've been reminding people for a very long time. It is one of the most important things for anybody to grasp about the nature of their type is that they are rejuvenated by going to sleep correctly. This is the way in which it works. The generator needs to drain their motor. That's why, as I said, the special condition of generators, which again is going to be a minority. You're going to find generator designs are about the equivalent of reflectors, a little bit more like the equivalent of quads in the dream life. In other words, maybe 3%, 4%. It's very small. But again, being able to go to sleep correctly is so essential. The need for projectors and manifestors and reflectors, to truly go through this decompression process of slowly approaching sleep. How important it is for them to get into the horizontal state before they drift off to sleep, that they give themselves a chance to release the energies that have been within them. These are just basic things. And, one of my things for the manifesting generator, this thing of going horizontal but continuing to be active, until you can finally burn out completely, the energy resources so that you can go off to sleep with a proper level of exhaustion. By the way, when I say exhaustion, most people think that is mental exhaustion. I don't mean it in that way. I really mean that, you can feel that your body has had enough, and that's it, and it's time. Setting yourself up correctly for sleep, going to sleep correctly, going to sleep in your own aura, all of that establishes your well-being when you awaken again. The interregnum, this sleeping stage, here you are without identity. This is not about, your well-being. This is the way in which programming information gets into the world. And each of us are unique. And in order for us to be able to fulfill our uniqueness, that our uniqueness also is something that is manifested in our dream rave. That is, each of us has a unique dream rave. So we begin with the light field. And when we're looking at the light field, the interesting thing about the light field, in relationship to thinking about basic design, you've got the 5720, so you've got an individual channel. You've got the 81, you have an individual channel. So you have very, very strong individuality that is a theme here, but it's keying hexagram. And of course it's a keying hexagram because it has to do with this, what is in fact a way in which specific information is programmed, special information is programmed into certain dreamers at certain times. And again, I will get to that in this program, but not for today. So we can see here that we have these 5 gates that are part of this. 4 of them are individual. The keying gate is the 62. And you'll notice right away that, you don't think of the 62 in the waking rave as a love gate. You don't. Unless you're bizarre, because it's just not something that you would naturally think of in that sense. And yet in the dream world, the the programming, because it's all programming, the programming of data is often experienced as getting information from, well, it could be some kind of dream ally. There is a sense of, cosmic love. And anyway, I will get into all of this as we go into the detail, but I just want to give you a taste. This is a way in which we get very, very, very detailed programming. Detailed programming. Remember something about the nature of the personality. What you're looking at here is the programming personality consciousness. In other words, the work of the light field is work that tends to bubble up into the personality domain. It just does. And of course, because we're being programmed by archetypes, there are all kinds of groups of people who have similar information being given to them. It's how things emerge into the world. You see, look, the program does not trust us to fulfill all of the possibilities of what need to be fulfilled. And when I say they don't trust us, please understand that I'm anthropomorphizing that. It's not the case. This is just the way things were, evolved. This is not just a safety valve for the program, but it's more than that. It's the way in which when the expression of rolling out the red carpet. This is the way the program rolls out the carpet for the future. It's why many people can have prophetic dreams. Because, of course, what the program is doing is that through the dream, so it's not directly interpreted by mind, identity, emotions, through the dream is programming information coming in that's slowly going to bubble to the surface. It rarely does directly. Again, it'll be these people that have these very special, crossover gates. But it does filter through into the collective unconscious. And as it filters through into the collective unconscious, eventually it emerges. Remember that anything that's going to take place here, when the awakened being, when you change state and you become awake, there is an immediate codon transference. Information is transferred. And the information is transferred through set systems. And each of those set systems have archetypal keynotes in the way in which they work. They end up being parts of ways in which things are expressed. They can become new ideas. They can become the susceptibility of the, why all of a sudden are people hooked to a trend? I mean, why? This is the program at work while you're asleep. And particularly the light field. I mean, the light field's really a cookie. I'm not a great fan of personality crystal consciousness bundles. And I say that simply in that because there are so many of them, despite the fact that each of them may in and of themselves be truly extraordinary, that we have a cacophony of information on this planet, and we have a species that has no ability to be able to discern what is correct for it. It leads to a real mess. And here you have the purest programming of personality consciousness, pumped in. And it is, how shall I say this, devious. It's not like it's direct. It's not like you think you have your dream because you remember what in essence is probably, a 19-second or 8-second, REM. It's not that. That is the waking remnant. And it's the waking remnant after it's been processed through codons back into your archetypal way of interpreting any phenomena and your history of it. It's not all the information. That's what makes this knowledge so beautiful. It isn't about, you dreamed about going into a tunnel? You mean you want to fuck your father? I don't know. Whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? In other words, it's not about that. It's about understanding what's really going on. And then you can begin to deconstruct what appears to be, the movie you're offered, and really see it in context. In context. So the great influencing gate of the personality, 60-second gate, the detail, and how important that is. All about the future. If you move below, you move into something that is different. And here, you move into very interesting process. First of all, on the surface, 20th gate. We know the 20th gate as an individual existential gate. But remember, there is no identity. There is no individuality in this. There is only individuality in, the reconstruction with awakening. What there is, though, is something very interesting because it's called sight. Sight. And there is a quality to this of this is the set designer. I guess that's one way I could describe the 20th gate here. It's a set designer. It really designs it designs a thing to see that gives you information, but you don't know what the information really is. Do you know these dreams? They're quite incredible. I've had this kind of dream where somebody hands me something, and I look at it, and there's this rush of, wow, I don't know what the hell it was. When you wake up and you don't know what it was. If we go down and we look at the line, and we understand the design, we can understand the programming intent. What is there? What is actually there in that thing that you can't see, and you can't see it because you reconstruct it. It's quite something. The 57th gate, attunement. Attunement. This is the great homogenizing gate of personality programming. It's the great homogenizing gate. I think this is, I'm not sure about, I think Freud was an archetype. But it really would have suited him to be a 57. Because the 57 is the storehouse of the universal archetypes. The demons that all mean the same thing. The situations that all carry the same values. The 57th gate is the only true awareness gate of the sleep state. There is, in that sense, not really another. Yes, you do have the 50th gate, but its function is very different. Here, again, remember that we're dealing only in the context of personality programming. This is personality programming us to the same archetypes, to the same fears, the same deep fears. And they evolve. We're talking about mutation. That personality programming has changed over time. That it evolves. That there are new good guys and bad guys, so to speak, that are introduced along the way. That the dream state is where the fears of the future are nurtured. They're nurtured here. The 8th gate. The 8th gate is really something. It's really something because it is, I guess you could call it nihilistic almost. Perhaps beyond even that. As if it were a destroyer. It can bring the shroud of darkness over everything. See, there's a terrible, terrible, terrible illusion that is constructed by the personality for the mind. That is the personality, the light field. Is that the demon realm are the bad guys. That they are the ones that are responsible for darkness. You know? And it's there in the 8th gate. You'll see the demon realm has its propaganda gate too. That says that the personality is dog, so to speak. But here you can really, this is where the personality, brings deep, deep fear into the dream world. I mean, deep fear into the dream world. We know by understanding the nature of the homogenized human being, the not-self person, we understand that they are driven by fears and nothing but. And they're never let off the hook. Thanks a lot. Never let off the hook. Never. No? Never. When you get to the one, how beautiful. Here is the light field and its identity. I mean, the light field has an identity. So it means that when you experience the light field, you invariably experience through some kind of personification, some kind of form personification, whether that is, some kind of being, creature, whatever the case may be. And what the one carries with it is joy. And joy in the sense of, we are bringing you the light, and the dark side is trying to shroud it. Shroud it. How joy becomes overwhelmed by darkness. So the light promises you joy. Every religion on earth is based on the light field and is based on these 5 themes. Think about that. Every one of them. The identity, they bring you the promise of joy. They condition you with that promise. They layer it with darkness. They attune you to the homogenized fears. They give you these glimpses of what's coming, and you wake up and you say, oh my God, I've got to do this now, Doesn't happen that fast. Well, sometimes. And it's programming. It's all about programming. See, once you get to the point where you can accept the fact that you are a mechanism, that you're a form principle, then you have to see it. That's what everything is. It's all about programming. It's all about us being liberated from being conditioned by what is not correct for us. It doesn't mean that what we take in the dream state is to be thrown away. As a matter of fact, the deeper you understand your dream design, the more interesting in that sense cataloging dreams become. Because you get to see, you know what that's like. You read the Rei Ching, or you listen to, for example, Darmen doing the neutrino forecast, and then you experience something and you can see how that experience relates to the way in which that line works, if you know what I mean. That relationship in the real world between the written word and the actual experience, and the relationship between them. We need the same experience from the dream plane. And because we're not given a true reproduction or a true recording, if you will, because we are given an interpretation that goes through layers, being able to understand what is the basic mechanism allows us to begin to see what we do remember, how we can put this into an order so that we can understand what is there. If you're operating correctly in your life, there is a lot of information that's there, that's waiting in the dream. There's other things too. there's incredible ironies. And I absolutely adore them. I'm not a dreamer. And what I mean by that, everybody dreams, but not everybody remembers. I've been a cannabis user for over 40 years now. And most dreams happen in the crossover state between just falling asleep and just at the edge of going into deep sleep. When you come to the surface is when the dreaming functions tend to be the most active. Because of the nature of cannabis, I bypass that stage. I go immediately into what is a deep sleep, and there are only 5 or 6 dreams, all of which, by the way, were quite extraordinary. I mean, from my own perspective, that I actually remember. Now, what's interesting in context to that story is that I'm a 60-second gate, but it's my design. You know? It's just interesting to think about it. It's my design. The moment I go into the sleep state, I don't have a 62. I don't have this opening for, getting very abrupt information directly, this kind of thing. I mean, it's one of the things to recognize about not personalizing your dream rave, because it isn't us. In that sense, it's not what we are as a conscious waking being. It is an instrument of the program that is specifically manipulated. Obviously, you look at this matrix for conditioning. Okay, enough of the light field. Let me leave that for last. Let's go to the other side. Let's go to the demon realm. And when we go to the demon realm, we're dealing with something that, again, we have a mixing here. We have a mixing of the individuality of what we know as the channel of struggle, the abstract collective of the channel of maturation, beginnings, middles, and ends of cycles, and of course the 19th gate, the tribal gate, the need gate. And this gate of approach pointed towards what is a very significant cross-barrier connection. And again, we will talk about these 3 bridges and the kinds of information that pours in through those bridges. What we're dealing with here is everything that has to do with the way in which our vehicles are being programmed while we sleep. This is vehicle programming. More specifically, it's design programming. If we go back for a moment, you have your dream. This part of the dreamer is what's going to translate this dream personality-wise. In other words, ultimately what your mind gets. But you see, when it's on the demon side, it's that dream thing that you feel. It's an energy thing. It's a very powerful energy thing. You feel it. You wake up with a feeling. And of course, you wake up with a very specific quality of energy to deal with the day. I mean, it is an energy programming in that sense for the day. Let's begin with the 19, because the 19 is the key gate. And again, you can see these key gates are the bridging gates. And when we're looking at the 19 gate, we have environment. Now remember, we're dealing with the physical realm. We are dealing with not meeting information, in a sense, not meeting the kinds of things that are mentally interesting in that way. We're dealing with physical phenomena. We're dealing with physical environments. Physical environments. These physical environments are very, very important. That is, anyone who carries the 19th gate in their dream rave, these are beings that have in their catalog of potential certain rooms, as an example, that they can dream, in which the experience in there is transcendent. As I said, I'll get into it because we're going to go gate by gate through the lines. But it's an extraordinary thing, these environments. These are not familiar environments, as an example. Not the familiarity that the mind needs you to see. That the mind needs you to think that you're in a certain place that you remember. No. These are alien environments, totally different environments. And usually the way it works is that you cannot identify the space that you're in. You just experience the space. When we move beyond the environments, we have two fascinating things. These two are really something. First of all, the flight. You can fly when you dream. You have no body in that sense. You're not identified with the physical form. Flying is one of the gifts that the form principle wants us to understand we all have. The design crystal, the magnetic monopole, they have a cabal. And if they got together and decided that we should be allowed to fly, we would fly. Because it's all a matter of gravity and relativity, and all of that could be manipulated. The flight is a way in which your body is aligned to a geometry for the coming day, every day. Like flight plans, And if you're operating correctly, then what you'll notice, because you'll have a fixed flight plan with a fixed line, is that in your waking state, by understanding the principle, you'll be able to experience in your waking state, in a sense, the prophecy of it being there. See, there's so much premonition in dreams. It's why people have been so turned on by them. It's why you have so many dream savants and, dream interpreters, mystical dream interpreters, and all these kinds of people. It's not because they particularly have their trip down. Most of them don't. It's simply that this is really, this is part of it. It is part of what we're about. It is part of the way in which we are programmed. We are aligned to a future geometry. We are constantly being aligned, unconsciously, being prepared for the next day. We think we're free and independent. We're vain as hell. It's like we're diapered. Everything's prepared. It's the way it works. Dying is really interesting. The 3 sacral gates are very, very powerful in the dream state. In order for the sacral center to operate correctly in the dream state, it cannot afford, how shall I describe that? It can't afford to be highly energized. It can't. It becomes very disturbing to the sleeper, and then you end up with somebody who has all kinds of waking problems, body problems, physical problems, exhaustion problems, all the various sleep sicknesses, and there's all kinds of stuff that floats around with all kinds of funny names, but anyway, it's a byproduct of that. Here you have the theme of dying. And it can be deeply misunderstood. I will give you, as we go through it, relative ways of looking at it, but I want you to grasp something, that if you're dying in a dream, it's actually protecting you from being over-energized in the dream. Now, of course, that doesn't seem very satisfying to the dream death, but it's a health issue, and a very important one. And in fact, when you're dying in a dream, it is actually your immune system saving you from a problem, which is an interesting way of understanding that. And then we get to the 3828. And obviously the 3828, you can see it in all its glory here. Fear and aggression. And it leads us to an understanding of the difference between the 2838 in a human being and the 2838 in a mammal. And everything about the 2838 in the sleep world. And unfortunately, most of it ends up being, how shall I say this, victimization. That is, victims of fear and victims of aggression that are very physical. They're very physical. I mean, these can be deeply violent in their nature. Absolutely essential, by the way. Think about the 2838. The 2838 is one of the most important aspects in the development of human history. That is, the 2838 embodies purpose. And it embodies purpose in an individual guise. And it transforms the savagery of integration into the knowing circuit and into the pursuit in the now of purpose and fulfillment. And yet we all know when we see somebody who's a 2838, we know the depth of their physical struggle on this plane. The struggle is there. It's an obvious one. It can be a struggle that operates at many levels, conscious, unconscious, whatever the case may be. But if you're carrying a conscious 2838, the dream state is a very healthy one for you as long as, the level of aggression and fear is heightened in the dream state. It drains it off. It drains off what is a very, very important mammalian attribute. I mean, you don't want to have a 2838 dog, I mean, I know. You don't want that. You really don't. It's not a good idea. It really isn't. You don't want a dog that's just a 38. I mean, you really don't. This is not the kind of pet that you want to bring into your life. And this gets translated. It's one of the reasons why you get this, this fear of the dark side and the form principle. But basically what's happening in the dream life is a cleansing process that's taking place. Really, it is a cleansing process. The aggression and fear is very important because if they're in the way, one can never truly see or get to one's purpose. That the dying is a protection mechanism. Literally a protection mechanism, which, by the way, is to the advantage of the program because the program doesn't want the dream cycle, to operate in a way that is unhealthy for the body because it needs the bodies to operate correctly. I mean, it's programming. When you get into the lines, you get into the dreams. These are the archetypal forces. You get into the lines, you get into the subtlety of the dream. You get into the color. You get into the drive behind it. You get into the tone. You see the cognitive roots and the way in which certain aspects of cognition are being imprinted in us at a deep, deep, deep unconscious level. Basically, this is all just a way of imprinting specific genes, because that's what we're looking at. We're looking at specific codons, imprinting specific codons that then have a responsibility of moving the information along. And of course, it's never the same. It always changes. It changes as it moves. And finally, we come to the earth plane. The earth plane is interesting. The earth plane, has this separation. It is the true sacral nightmare. I can say awful things about the dream state. The earth plane is, if you're somebody that has the earth plane in your dream design, you have to deal with the astral. You have to deal with the madness of humanity. And you have to filter it. See, the program isn't satisfied with, its conditioning process while we're in the dream state. Because in fact, each of us have a unique dream design. But of course, one of the ways in which it can absolutely impact us is by regurgitating the human consciousness field, the so-called collective unconscious. And this is what the earth plane is. It is the result of the dream state on the waking plane. Because after all, the earth plane is all about taking in the neutrino information that's passing through the waking beings while you're asleep. This is the chaos field. But it's also deeply homogenizing. It is the collective not self. And it's the collective not self being processed through us. And so it carries very basic themes. First of all, the key is the mutation. And again, we'll talk about this separately because, of course, again, this is one of these bridging gates. And the information that comes through here is very, very important because this is information that can change the way humanity actually thinks, which is quite a statement. Again, given an understanding that this is a percolating process as things move through into eventually the conscious mind, into eventually the way in which the not-self perceives things. But what I really want you to grasp here is the human of this. In other words, this is what we take in the earth plane. We take in human greed and longing and yearning. We take in human sex shit. And I want to tell you, that if you carry the 50th gate, wow, are you getting pumped with all of that? And the time and the chaos. Now the time is fascinating because in fact, it is one of the few places where the normal understanding of time can be, it simply can disappear. The linear aspect of time can disappear. There are many fascinating aspects in all of this. The most difficult is the chaos. This is the chaotic, collective, not self, consciousness field permeating through your body. Through your body. The dream state. This is how the program controls us. Truly programs us. Guarantees that we are prepared for the program and its homogenizing work. I don't want to demystify or take away the fun of being entertained by the curiosity of the dream. But when you begin to see this for what it is, as another control mechanism, and it is another control mechanism, how important it is to understand how it works, to deconstruct all of this, to begin to see what you're really taking in. Think about these people that wake up in the morning and they've had a dream and they get stuck with it, They're thinking about it all day. Now they have no idea what it is, but everything associated with that dream in terms of the way in which they were programmed during their sleep is obviously having a deep, deep impact on them. The conditioning is really working. You can liberate yourself from that by seeing simply how it works. How it works. And to be able to help other people. I mentioned this last week. I stayed away from this subject for a very long time because it was being taken to exactly the place that it never belonged. This is not about anything that anyone has ever understood about the dream state and the dreamer. This is truly new knowledge. Truly new knowledge. And it doesn't fit into the whole framework of knowledge that has been rooted in dream interpretation and the psychological this and that of it. and the naming of certain archetypes, and trying to associate them with certain behavioral traits or neuroses or this and that and on and on and on. Or the fortunate ones that they have the serendipity and the mechanics that they get these very special kind of dreams, where they suddenly have reputations as seers and prophets. And they do their own interpretations on top of it. Anyway, I don't want to get into my ratty side. Stick my thumb too deep in their eye. But it's very important for me that you grasp what this is. To really see what sleep is. Talk about pulling the wool over our eyes, Talking about blindfolding us. See it for what it is. We're set up. We're set up. See, my whole thing is that this is the end of humankind. We don't have that long. Millennium, a little bit more. It's the end. I don't give a damn about the homogenized program and where it's going. I understand. I know the movie. But it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with now. As humans, we are here to fulfill our unique purpose. We are in conflict with the world of the program. We are in conflict in the sense that the world of the program is constantly trying to move us away from the only thing that we've ever been here to do, which is to live by our own authority. To say we no longer need the babysitter, We're grateful for the environmental stage. Let us play out our movie on the stage. All is well. But we will go this way and that way according to our design intelligence. That we will live out the richness of this experience aware programming. Okay. Next week we're going to begin with the light field. We're going to go in order, and we are going to go through each of the gates, and I'm going to introduce you to dream line structure. And dream line structure is wonderful. It's also wonderful in terms of, all the levels, all the extraordinary levels of keynotes that we can associate with hexagrams and lines. Dream keynotes, mammalian keynotes, plant keynotes, sex keynotes, goes on and on and on. There are these incredible levels to see in the magic of, these hexagrams, these codons. And the lines for me in the, in the dream work, they're quite something. Anyway, okay. You have yourself, an entertaining new year. I wish you all an entertaining new year. I wish you all awareness. And, wherever you are, you enjoy your day. I'll see you tomorrow, or those I will see tomorrow, and the rest of you next time. Bye for now.